All right, the public session of the Board of Curators will be back in session. We're going to call on our, is this your first board meeting, Dr. Agarwal? I can't remember. Where is it?
No.
No, this isn't his first one. Where is he? You know, there are days that a plan works, and there's just sometimes a plan falls apart. Cindy, where's Cindy?
Showed you that, didn't
Yeah, that's pretty good, isn't it? It's pretty good. We're doing okay.
Jeff, Cindy's my enforcer, see.
200 million for the. Okay.
I still am, it's bad. Okay, we're back in session, and we're really looking forward to hearing from Dr. Agarwal about the highlights of the University of Missouri, Kansas City.
Thank you. Is this on? Yes.
It's a sure job.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here today. I've been here just about 3 months or so, and let me tell you this. I came in to this job with a great bit of excitement, and people have been asking me if I'm still excited, and I'll be straight with you. I'm even more excited than I was when I came in. This is just, for me, there's so much potential here. This is such an awesome place. And it doesn't mean that we don't have work to do. We have a lot of work to do. But we are really, really excited about where we need to go. So in terms of what has emerged for me over the past 3 months is some areas that need immediate attention, that we're doing well, but we can do even better. And those are student success, student experience, and then the research enterprise. And I'll talk a little bit about the organizational structure and some of the changes we are putting in place to increase the efficiency of our administration, as well as the Conservatory project that is back on the table, and then a few other initiatives that I'm launching. So student success, as we talked about it this morning in the strategic plan piece, we need to increase the retention and the growth enrollment. And those of you who were there in this meeting with the students just a few minutes ago heard some of the issues that the students face. Those are not new issues. Those are issues that continue to plague higher education, which just means that we need to work harder. Both in terms of recruitment and retention. For recruitment, we need to do more strategic marketing. We need to do better scholarshiping so that we are competitive. The cost of college, as we heard, can be a deterrent to many students. And we need to be very strategic in how and where we grow, so those areas aligned with the workforce needs of this area. The other piece is the advising piece. What I've been telling folks on campus, once the student arrives on a campus and that we have admitted them, they are ours. And we need to reach out to them. We need to assess them to figure out where they stand academically. And that may not be where we want them to stand academically, but it is our job then to reach out to them and bring them along to where we want them to stand without lowering any standards. That means there's a lot of infrastructure that we need to put in place, especially if they are underrepresented minorities or first-generation students. One size does not fit all. And this infrastructure will take an investment. It's not going to be simple, but as I've mentioned before, there are a lot of role models out there. People have been doing this successfully, and we just need to bring those pieces here. So we have started working on those. We had this mini summit, if you would, internally to figure out how and what changes we are going to make. Working on retention, not waiting for next year, but actually working on the retention of the cohort of students who just came in a month ago. How do we do better at retaining these students and not wait till next year? So the rhythm will also change. We are no longer going to be working on what I would call an academic rhythm, which is months, semesters, and years. We need to do this more of a game rhythm where we're good at soccer, so we need to be playing like you're doing soccer. So which is constantly on the move, and there's no time to rest. So we'll be working on those issues as we go along. It is that kind of help that will help us retain students, and once we retain students, we actually increase enrollment, and it's also much better financially for us in the long run. So we can easily, right now, we are losing about 25% of our students, the retention rates, and that just shows you these students who are here, if we can retain, it's not going to be possible to retain 100%, but if we can retain 80 to 90%, well, 90%, then we're doing much, much better.
You may have said this, you're talking undergrads here.
Talking undergraduates primarily, because that's where the issues are. The graduate school pieces run well, professional schools do quite well in terms of retention. The other pieces to this, the onboarding of the students into the school, especially with, again, URMs and first gen, that's very important. How do we work with them in the first year? What kind of tutoring and supplemental instruction we have for them, what kind of financial help and financial counseling we have for them, and then career and life counseling pieces as well. Those 5 components have to be there for any successful institution. It is interesting to note, and I'm not sure if many people are aware of it, but the whole concept of supplemental instruction, SI, which is used worldwide now in pretty much every school, was invented here at UMKC. And so we should be the leaders in that, and we got much more to do there. So student success is a very, very big piece for me. Now that does, another piece of student success is a sense of belonging. The students need to feel that this is a campus where they belong. They need to have pride in this campus. So we're beginning to do a lot of little things that generate that pride, so that 20 years from now, they have warm memories of the campus that they were on. One of them is building school spirit. And so we are doing Rue Blue Fridays. If you follow me on Twitter, oftentimes you'll see me on Fridays tweeting out, I'm wearing my blue. How about you? I want not just the students, but all our alumni all over the city. Now we are getting a little bit of an issue with the Chiefs, because in Kansas City on game days or the Fridays before the games, people wear red. And I've said if you want to wear red, that's fine, but otherwise try wear blue. There's much more sporting. We're bringing back some of the sporting events back to campus. We have been playing away from campus, and the students don't show up there because it's just a hassle for them to get there. So the men's basketball program is coming back to Sweeney on campus.
Molly, just to follow up on that, what is the status of, I know we're working on our athletic department. I know we've had some ideas and some changes there in UMKC athletics. Can you give us a status update on that?
So as you all know, we were looking at the whole athletic setup here. I brought in Mike Alden, who used to be the AD at Mizzou, as a special advisor, and he's been working with the athletic department. We have had a change of leadership there in the athletic department, so we have an interim person leading it. She used to be the assistant. And there's a lot of structural and accountability issues that had to be cleaned up, and Mike is helping a lot with that. Very elementary things that perhaps should have been there. That also ties in with the financial piece of that. They are very close to giving me a budget. They had given me a budget, a balanced budget, that actually was working toward reducing the load on the general revenue. But a couple of things have come up that they have to go back and correct for. But that's where we're headed. The idea is constantly now, from this point on, first of all, not be in the red. Number 2, not be as dependent on general revenue as you go forward. So everything I'm hearing from Mike and Ursula are positive, that they're confident it can be done. There's some excitement in the donor community as well, because they're beginning to see a plan emerge. But some of these other things, like the basketball piece that we're bringing back, one of them is for spirit, but also it's also to reduce expenses. Even though we were not being charged much rent by the city, there were other expenses of hosting and security and other things. So each little piece that we can reduce will be helpful. So at this point, we're looking for a new athletic director who can come in, and again, Mike Alden is helping with that. So I'm feeling good about this at this point in time. There may be some changes we may have to make in terms of how many sports we offer, but those will yet to be decided.
Great, thank you.
We need to have much more programming on campus. One of the things that the students asked me when I first came here and met with them was, build us a residential experience. This needs to be a campus where there's a residential experience that is still elements of a commuter school to some extent. And as part of that, there need to be student activities, student programming. We have a new dean of students that has just joined us, and I don't know if she's here right now. She was in the other room. Full of energy, comes with a lot of ideas. I would like this to be a bustling campus, past midnight, with programming that we offer, other student groups come up with their own. That's the kind of engagement that we need, and when that happens, students actually do better even academically. One other piece that we need to think about is on-campus housing, affordable campus housing. So a rule of thumb, very rough rule of thumb for urban research universities has been that 20% of your population should live on campus. And our population on campus right now is about 9%. If we grow enrollment as we hope to do, that number the overall number will also increase simultaneously. I do realize that if we do online, there will be a reduction in that, but I think there's still a lot of scope for growth in the online housing, in on-campus housing. The other piece is we are really thrilled that the streetcar is now going to be extended once they find the funding all the way to campus. It will be right here across Whole Foods, right across the street from campus. So that's going to connect us all the way to downtown and beyond. With that, however, there will be some challenges. There will be more prosperity, more businesses, and property values will go up, which means rents will go up in this area. So we need to be cognizant of that and start taking action on that now so that our students are not pushed further out away from campus if they stay close to campus. So, but it's still a lot of excitement. You can see the student groups have formed. There's a group called the Roo Nation that show up at all games and are cheering things on. We have a new hand sign coming from Texas, where all the large schools have a hand sign. I asked if there was a hand sign here, and they said, actually, there has been one, but nobody's used it for years. So I asked them to bring it out and dust it off, and now the students are beginning to do it. So that's the hand sign, the Roo. And so if you haven't been to one of those big schools like Michigan or Texas schools, just look at some YouTube videos when a few thousand students at graduation or at a game do the hand sign. It kind of connects everybody together. It's the school spirit that comes through. So those are the little things that we have to do to make this a great university, which it has a lot of potential for being. Research enterprise. Our goal is to double the grant spending or expenditures in 10 years. I think we could perhaps even do it sooner, given all the components that we have here today in terms of the excellence of faculty in all the different departments we have. Some of the things that we need to do there, as I mentioned, we need to build a better infrastructure to support the current faculty, but also we need to hire very strategically in areas that are emerging. So we have some very good strengths in defense and national security research and development, especially in the area of drones. We have a very, very large grant that came in not too long ago, and there's much more in the pipeline. We have a lot of people who are working in big data science, and this is an area that a lot of businesses here work in Cerner, Garmin, H&R Block, IRS. They all need data scientists. As I'm going out and meeting with community leaders, business leaders, and asking them what they need, data scientists is one piece that's coming through loud and clear. I did have a mini summit again. 30 faculty showed up who are actually working in this area. Didn't realize that, and they didn't know each other. So good place to start with, pull them together, and then this will be a big contribution we can make toward the TPMC, because they will be needing a whole lot of data as well. And then, of course, leveraging all our health sciences district partners and others like St. Luke's, MRI, and then Stowers, and build on the strengths in addition to collaborating with our other 3 universities within the system. So lot of opportunity, and I'm excited about this piece. Again, it's not going to be easy. None of these things are going to be easy, but I'm pretty positive that we can do them. A little briefing on the Conservatory project. As you know, last year it was disapproved by the governor, and so we started again this year. We did an RFI, request for information. We got a lot of respondents. Interestingly, none of those included the site that was in play last year at downtown. So that was not on the table anymore. We had a lot of meetings with our faculty and staff from the Conservatory and the theater department, because the theater is now going to be part of the Conservatory. And one thing I asked them is, what will be best for the program, for the students, and for you faculty? Because at the end of the day, it's an academic program that we're talking about. And it was pretty unanimous. The closer to campus, the better. And so with that, we have asked for some more information, working with system officials as well as our own folks on the RFI. We have modified it. We've said within a 2.5-mile radius around UMKC. This excludes downtown. And the closing date for the second phase was, I think, yesterday, so we should have had the proposals. We invited everyone and anyone who had applied for the first round, whether they had asked for a downtown location, to come back in if they can give us a location that's closer to campus. Let me tell you this without revealing too much, is that there are some sites very close to campus that are of great interest to us. So the new sites have emerged that are very exciting possibilities.
Question on that. When do you think a site selection might be forthcoming, and is there still some sense of urgency to get it out so that there might be a proposal for the legislature yet this fall, or not? I don't know the answer to that question.
Well, I'll have to consult with the leadership here to figure out the timing for that. I was going to meet with Dusty a little bit later on to get his input as well.
Okay,
But from
you can
our
get back on
side,
that.
it's a matter of weeks at this point to decide where the site will be.
Okay.
And the goal still is to get it done within a year. But again, heavy lifting, because the resources from the state have to be put together again, as well as from the community. So we start from scratch again. But again, I feel good about it. I'm getting good signals. Having said that, as we have learned, it's not done until it's done. Streamlining structure and operations. This has been an ongoing effort. System has been asking for this, but this was started before I even got here. We have a new budget model in place now for each unit, which actually they asked to budget in advance, and they're going to be held accountable for meeting their budgets. The second piece here is that we have taken out duplicative services that different units had, and we're centralizing them in a shared services model. And so there are 9 different areas where we are doing this. Includes HR, IT, finances, and others, where by pulling out those resources and putting them centrally, I think we can provide more efficient, better service, faster service, as opposed to people who are perhaps not trained for these things sitting in the different units and trying to get it done. So we'll hear more about that. Now, to monitor that and make sure that we're getting the right service out of these groups, we are putting together service experience councils that will comprise of people from the customer units that will give us constant feedback on how these service units are doing. So we'll work in progress, but those should be in place very quickly. Lastly, a few other key initiatives, and I've launched a few task forces in areas that I thought were critical that we need to look at. One of them is mental wellness. This is an issue on all campuses, oftentimes not well recognized, sometimes not until something really, really bad happens. But let alone something really bad happening, even if it's one student who's suffering from it and doesn't do well for whatever reason, that's bad enough. We do have a lot of resources on campus, but I've asked for the task force to do a complete inventory of everything that we have. And oftentimes where campuses fail is that the gaps in between the services, and students go through those cracks. And faculty and staff, we need to think about all of the folks in this community. And so they ask them for recommendations for improvements. As you all know, we have a historic building on campus, the Epperson House. It's supposed to be haunted, and it's boarded up right now. I had threatened that I would like to move in there and do it as a fixer-upper TV show, but that got voted down. But it's a beautiful building, as you can see, and it is boarded up right now, and nobody's in it. We have a task force to see how we can reuse it. And some of the ideas that have been thrown out is a faculty center combined with the alumni center and conference place. It is not up to code at all, so we'll have to spend some significant money, but hopefully the community will step up and help us with that. So I'm excited about that. And as I mentioned earlier, the student housing is a piece that's definitely on my mind. And so I'm getting a task force put together to plan for what kind of student housing will be needed over the next 10 to 15 years. And then we'll go about the business of figuring out how we will cobble together the resources to build that kind of housing. So those are the highlights of what I have for you today. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Any questions?
Chancellor Agarwal, I've got a question about the student housing. I'm wondering, would that be led by private enterprise, or is that something we would do?
I think all options will have to be on the table, because
Just wonder if it makes more sense to let private enterprise handle that and us focus on a lot of the other things. I mean, I can see I just wonder.
I think there may have to be partnerships. We may not be able to do it alone, but it may involve some university resources, maybe university lands, because we are getting boxed in now around us, so there's not that much space available that's freestanding. We have also talked to other universities like Rockhurst, which is next to us, to see how we can collaborate with them because they have the same needs. And so I think everything is on the table. All we know at this point is that we will need more housing, and it needs to be affordable. Some of the partnerships we have done in the recent past perhaps are not the most affordable in terms of the housing that's being developed, not from a student point of view. So just a concern, because if we want to grow that enrollment to the size that we want, these other pieces, the housing, the advising, the infrastructure, counseling, all of these will have to be in place to make the students successful. So it cannot be sequential. We need to get going at everything.
Thank you.
I'd like to follow up on Jeff's question. We have had a brief history in having private housing essentially on campus, and it didn't work very well. And in the long run, we had a problem, and so we're solving that problem now, as you are undoubtedly involved in. It's expensive to do that. What would be wrong with partnering but having private money build nearby, because there are residences that can be used for to convert the property, not by the university, because there would be some public feedback on that. But what would be wrong with having an arrangement where private entrepreneurs do dorms, and that we have some relationship with them to have, I don't want to say rent control, but to make sure that it is affordable? And the second question related to this is, if we move more into online learning, will we have the same demand that we've had in the past as we increase our enrollment for on-campus housing? We'll always have some residential, but we're talking about moving more online, and in the metropolitan area, there'll be a lot of non-traditional student learning in the future. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I'll answer the second one first. You're definitely right. As we get more into online, there'll be a reduction in the demand for on-campus housing. But if you look at the amount of growth we want to do in enrollment, not all of that will come from online. So I think there will be a mix. So there'll definitely still be a need to put more on campus or close to campus housing, even when we correct for the growth we will get in online. So there'll be a good mix. We'll have to figure out what that mix will be.
Thank you.
The other pieces in terms of private enterprise building, no problem with that at all. We'd welcome that as long as there's some kind of a mechanism for rent control on those. We could even encourage that and send shuttles in the morning to collect students from those places so that they don't have to drive, because then we have a parking problem. So all of those options are available, but it's just an issue that we have to look at and study carefully and plan for in advance, because otherwise it will help our recruitment efforts.
As far as private development, does the university have any land that they could potentially give at a subsidized price to a private developer to encourage lower rents?
In terms of exactly how it could be handled, I would defer to the Ryan and others at the system and Sharon, but we do still have land that can be used. So we're not totally built out yet.
It is a sensitive issue because a farsighted benefactor of the university purchased a lot of housing. But as you might guess, the neighbors have an issue about encroaching too much on the neighborhoods. So it's not that it's easily developable by the university.
And even without that housing, I think there's still property on campus within academic control that can be used. But we'll need to think about exactly how much do we need. Any other questions?
Well, just out of curiosity, have you had a chance to interact with the folks in the Kansas City Animal Health Corridor and some of the animal pharmaceutical industry here in Kansas City?
Not that particular group yet.
Okay.
Now with the BioNexus is a group that's pulling everything together. We have talked to them. Unfortunately, the lead person just
Okay.
said he's leaving.
Do we engage, as far as some of the research that UMKC is involved in? I was just curious of how much of that is, how much do we tap into that industry in order to get research dollars, or are they just simply going to K-State or other universities nearby? I was just curious if we're involved at all with those
I
companies.
think there's some involvement, and we have especially one faculty member who's got this data science-based One Health program that's actually working with K-State. But we're not as deep in terms of expertise in those areas, more toward the biological sciences and human health pieces is where we are stronger, especially with clinical partners at St. Luke's and Children's Mercy and Truman.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks.
Any other questions? If not, we're going to move to Curator Burnsick and Finance Committee.
Thank you.
Dr. Agrawal, thank you very much. Curator, you're up.
Thank you, Chairman Steelman. The Finance Committee today has 2 information items and 2 action items. The first information item is the fiscal year 2018 investment performance review. Treasurer and Chief Investment Officer Tom Richards and Eileen Neal, Managing Director of Veris, will review the University of Missouri fiscal year 2018 investment performance.
Good afternoon, thank you. I will get started. Veris, of course, remains our investment consultant. In the interest of the schedule and timing today, the Veris consultant isn't going to join us, just so that we can get through more quickly. I wanted to review, just briefly, going back to the changes that were approved by the board in September. We had some pretty major asset allocation changes. And just to highlight what the objectives were and then to give you an update on where we are. We essentially wanted to begin reducing risk. As all of you are aware, the markets are at the peak of the cycle. Even today, as we kind of stand here, the equity markets are setting another all-time high. So part of our objective has been to pull back on the risk while the markets are up. So that's one of the objectives to the right. One of the ramifications of that we'll continue to talk about is that if this continues, as an example, if this were to continue indefinitely, which I don't think it will, at some point it will affect our peer performance because we're reducing risk while other peers may not have done the same. As it turns out, the changes that we've implemented have not impacted our peer performance at all, and we remain roughly in about the top third for both endowments and pension funds. Summary of activity, the retirement and the endowment, I think it's good to look at this in terms of a roll forward, the beginning balance. You get a sense of the magnitude of the contributions for both the retirement plan and the endowment pool. One of the things I'll point out, which is consistent with our discussions on the retirement plan specifically over the past 18 months, if you look at the contributions going into the plan, $107 million, and the benefit payments going out to our retirees, $233 million. We're a mature plan, in meaning that we're paying out more than what we're putting in, And I can tell you that this has flipped in the 9 years that I've been here. So we hit the peak 10 years ago. I believe that the contributions were still equal to or slightly more than the benefits. This will continue to accelerate, and again, this kind of just as another illustration of the issues that exist with the defined benefit plan, just as it matures. Overall, for the year, net investment income combined between the two, if we add the general pool in as well, we're about $500 million in investment income. The transition, this is just a graphical representation of the portfolio as it existed prior to the board changing the policy and moving over to the right-hand side. One of the things you'll notice is that it looks a little bit more simplified. We've eliminated some asset classes as part of the risk reduction efforts. And we've also expanded the Portable Alpha program, which I'll talk about. One of the things I wanted to highlight, though, when I talked with the board in September, we talked about the importance of being very careful in how we transition from our old targets to the new targets. We need to be very thoughtful about that. We did what we said we were going to do, and as a result of the actions that we've taken in transitioning over, we've added about $29 million in value, as opposed to having switched basically at one point in time. Portable Alpha program, as you may recall, we are running Portable Alpha. We talked about it last year. We're able to run the portfolio overall using capital very efficiently. Prior to the change approved by the board in September, our exposures were running 107% of capital. We're now at 120% of capital. The main things I wanted to highlight, though, in terms of sort of telling the board what we're going to do and then telling you that we've done that and that we've met expectations. We had the increased Portable Alpha program fully funded for only half of the fiscal year by the time it was approved by the board in September and we implemented it. The market environment also has been very challenging for the strategies that are in the Portable Alpha program. And yet, despite those two things, the Portable Alpha program in FY18 delivered exactly what we expected, which was about 40 basis points to the total return of the plan overall. If I reduce that to dollars, you ask me what's it worth to run this. In a year when it met its expectations minimally, it added $21 million in investment income. So we had good news there. If we look at one-year returns by asset sector, I'm not going to go into a great amount of detail. I'll just highlight two main things. Private equity, below the benchmark. We have a couple of private equity investments that have very particular situations that are going on right now that we believe are transitory and more issues of timing. So we look at those, in those cases, as more unrealized losses that are likely to reverse. Real estate had a great year. That's another outlier, up almost 700 basis points over the benchmark. We had a couple of real estate investments that had 30% returns. And what's happening in real estate, similarly to what we're doing ourselves, real estate investors are looking at the markets and the valuations, and they're selling. They're selling high, and so I think what's happened is that the properties that are in the investments have not really been marked up along the way to market. They're liquidating at the top of the market, and we're getting some pretty good outsized gains, which is a good thing. In terms of the total portfolio returns for FY18, good news to share for the retirement plan, return of 8.6%. The benchmark was 8.1%, and a 60/40 passive portfolio was 7.3%. Similar results for the endowment pool. In terms of the value creation, what I'd highlight is if you look at what is the value of the performance, the actual performance against benchmark, it comes out to about $30 million. The other question that we often get is, what's the value of active management versus simply a passive portfolio? Well, this particular year, the value is $76 million. So again, if we were to look at, for example, the endowment pool return 9.4%, a 60/40 passive kind of index portfolio would have returned about 7.3%. Longer term returns, a couple of things to point out here. If you start at the 10-year point and look in, I think what you'll see is a trend where as we get closer into the near term, the positive variances between actual and benchmark grow. And what I would tell you, there's a couple things going on. One of which is if you look at the changes that the board has allowed us to implement that were most significant, they've all been within about the last 5-year period. So we've got some significant changes in strategy that have been implemented, and they're gaining traction. The other thing that's gone on, and I'll illustrate this in the next slide, a 60-40 sort of traditional passive portfolio over the last 10 years has performed about as good as it ever has in history. So on the flip side, to the extent that any investment portfolio has kept up with that over the last 10 years, it's not something you feel bad about matching. So what do I mean by that? This is displaying sort of up and down. It should be horizontally. But if you were to look at, sorry about that, each one of these lines represents a rolling 10-year period since 1970. So imagine that one line is 1970 plus 10 years. The next line starts 1971, 1972. So each of those lines represents an investment outcome over a 10-year period since 1970. The blue line, which is in the middle of the graph, again, it should be oriented the other way. The blue line is the average return. The red line, which is at the very top, is the 10-year period that's just ended. So it's kind of saying if you look at all of the return combinations since 1970, and that's just when good data has been available, this last 10 years has been the best performing of any of these periods. That also should cause us to think, which we have because we've begun reducing risk in the portfolio, that that's not likely to continue. And often what happens after a period like this is that you have a period that perhaps goes the other way. So just wanted to point that out. We've talked about that in terms of, again, the overall risk reduction efforts. The general pool. Good news to share, again, with that. Above benchmark, and the value of that being, I think, over the last 3 years, about $44 million. The strategic dividend that was issued under the central bank structure this fiscal year was $15 million. I went back to the point where we started that program in terms of that structure in FY14, and the total dividends now are at $81 million. I mean, those are resources that have been used by the board to affect positive change on the campuses. The other thing I'd like to highlight in terms of this, to the extent that the Fed keeps raising rates, we obviously, because of the nature of this pool, we have a lot of cash in this pool. So we will benefit in terms of income growth in this pool just by the cash rates going up, which will be additive as we move forward. Favorite slide, MANET investment management fees for 2018. What I'd like to talk about is the portfolio broken into a core and an alpha section. So one of the first things, just to sort of remind us in terms of the math and the numerator and the denominator, we're running 120% exposure over 100% of capital. So just in terms of the sort of the math behind this, the fees are being driven by 120% exposure. The denominator of that calculation is the 100% of capital. So if we were to look at just the core portfolio, the basic 100% of capital, and look at the fees on that, we're about 67, 69 basis points, which is very much in line with peers. If anything, it's on the lower end. When we add in the alpha portfolio, excuse me, and then some administrative fees that covers investment custodial expenses, consulting, et cetera. All in, we get to about 89 basis points on retirement and 93 on endowment. One of the questions we've been asked in the past, and maybe last year, was what percentage of the portfolio is run passively? So if we look at the core portfolio, and we look at the percentage of the core portfolio run in passive strategies, which I would define as fees of 15 basis points or less, it's 40%. So 40% of the retirement plan, 40% of the endowment pool within the core are being implemented passively at very low cost. The other thing I'd mention, just with the alpha portfolio, if we look at that in dollars, the fees of the alpha portfolio combined were about $10 million. So is that worth it? Those are largely hedge fund strategies. Well, that alpha program, after the fees had been paid, returned about 21 million. So the fees are going to be a little bit higher with strategies like that because they're very tailored to our specific needs in terms of our risk tolerances. But it generated $21 million in exchange for that otherwise would not have existed had we not had the program. In terms of the guidance on the retirement plan, if you might remember that the sort of the fiscal year end of the pension plan is September 30th, and that's a date that's used for contribution funding, et cetera. I have July here, but through the end of August, the retirement plan return is 6.9%. Our new target is 7.2. So we'll have to see what the month of September looks like, but I think we'll be fairly close.
Can I ask a question on that last one?
Yeah.
So from time to time, we revisit what our target is in the retirement fund. I think maybe the last time we really did that was a year and a half ago. But what are other institutions doing now or thinking about now because of the bull run and people's speculation of when the next recession will occur, not whether it will? Is that something we should be looking at in the next 6 months to revisit whether 7.2 is realistic?
Well, the trend continues to be that the return assumptions are coming down. And at 7.2%, we're certainly at the lower half of our peers. In terms of when to address that, we're still implementing, currently right now, we're implementing the 7.2% reduction. I don't know that we would necessarily revisit that within that shorter period of time. I think it's something we should keep our eye on, and it should be a constant point of discussion.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, Tom, what is our risk when you've got a 60-40 passive? What kind of risk level do we run with our portable alpha and all we're doing? Much riskier
In
than 60-40?
terms of a vol,
Yeah, standard deviation, beta, whatever you want to.
probably in modeling that, somewhere around 11% of the volatility basis, around 11. And in fact, and we presented this in September when we went to the new asset allocation, we expanded portable alpha. The model volatility of the portfolio actually decreased over what it was before, partially because we've reduced equity risk, we've reduced credit risk, and we put in bonds, which are more stable and less volatile.
And our equity side is cutting back U.S., more international. Wasn't that the idea? A little bit.
We're currently equal weighting U.S. and non-U.S.
Okay, thanks.
Tom, you mentioned, again, kind of what John's saying, you're cutting back the equity exposure, trying to reduce risk. You also mentioned as rates go up, obviously more income can be generated
The general
with some of
goal.
the portfolio. But you also have added quite a bit of bonds. What's the duration look like? I mean, because that's complicated, right?
Mhm.
In a rising interest rate environment. So I just wanted to, see your thoughts on that.
We've been going very slowly and very methodically. The benchmark that was modeled for the treasuries in particular was a long-duration treasury benchmark. I would tell you that we're not close to that right now. And in fact, from a capital basis, we haven't fully deployed the capital to fully fund the treasuries. We've been really nonstop working on strategies of how to most effectively implement the treasury and TIPS exposures, and have another meeting on Monday. What I can tell you is, yes, it is a risk. It certainly is a risk, and we're being very careful about it and moving very slowly.
That piece, when the treasuries are fully implemented, they'll be long dated
The duration will be
duration.
longer, and yes.
Thank you.
And again, just to tie it back, that's part of the risk reduction strategy, so that in terms of, there certainly can and might be some pain as rates continue to rise. The idea being that when a recession hits, you've got some insurance in the portfolio to stabilize it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Tom? All right, thank you very much. We
you.
will, nice work. We will move to the second information item today, which Vice President Ryan Rapp will review the fiscal year 2018 financial status report.
Thank you, Curator Burnsick. We'll, in your mailing materials, we provided a written summary of where we've ended FY18. We're right now in the middle of wrapping up our audit. Our controller and his team are busy finalizing the financial statement audit. So some of the stuff we're handing out to you isn't quite complete. So it'll say unaudited. We should have those completed by the end of the month, and we'll supply those to you at the November board meeting. But when we just step back and we think about what did our financial performance look like over the last year, here are just some of the key themes. Our balance sheet does remain strong, but I noted on here, but if it's going to require action, and part of that's, Tom touched on the asset side of the retirement plan, our benefit liabilities continue to grow. And I think one of the challenges we face is you can continue to look at our strong balance sheet, and you can look at the performance in some areas of our university and at the health system and go, well, it wasn't that bad of a year. I think the real challenge we face is it won't come rapidly, but we'll look back over a decade and go, wow, the overall financial position of the university has really eroded. And so when I talk about margin, sometimes I call it net revenue. So if you hear me say net revenue, I'm talking about margin. We've had really strong margins, but that was largely driven by what you saw from Jonathan and his team this morning, and you'll see that in some of the later charts. Then when we get into the individual universities, that's where we do see on the income statement side, margins are starting to weaken. And people say, well, why do you need a margin, or why do you need net revenue? We don't need net revenue to pay a shareholder a dividend. We're not doing it for those reasons, but we do need net revenue to put money into scholarships, to put money into research. So anyone that thinks that we don't have to have a business model that generates a return, it's just a different type of return. And I think I've talked before about this, but we have three things that's occurring to our core business model. And that's why I'm saying we really know we have to change. We've experienced a 3-year trend of flat to declining enrollment, flat to declining state support, and really flat tuition prices. We've never had those three things in the history of the system all at once. I think this is a national trend. I don't think this is something that's unique to us. I do think, though, as an institution, and in this state, we're experiencing it maybe earlier than some others are. So we are going to have to figure this out maybe before others do. And really, I'll talk more later on in the slides about the focus has to really shift from one of how do we allocate resources, but how do we perform financially and how do we generate revenue. And I think with the $260 million in strategic funding that was announced last week by President Choi, I think that really can serve as seed money to drive that change through the university. So with that, I'll go over just a couple of charts and then talk about how we think of financial management as we move forward. The first couple, I didn't break these out by campuses because it's really some of the scale metrics and some of the things that we look at in terms of, we know this is what Moody's and S&P look at. If you look at our asset and liability growth, they continue to grow in line with one another. We've now got over $9 billion in assets and right around $4 billion in liabilities. if you think about it, we've slowed down our debt issuance and our liquidities continue to grow. I'll spend a little bit of time on this slide because I think it's something that we have been dealing with, but we're going to need to deal with more as we look down the road. When you think about, I just said we've issued less debt, but our benefit liabilities have continued to grow. They're now over $1.2 billion. We did, with the action the board took with the post-employment retirement benefits, we did close the growth in that. And then also, while it increased our costs, we lowered the discount rate on the pension plan. But I think we will have to think about other actions as it relates to the growth in these benefit liabilities. I think we've bent our curve, but we still need to do more work, and there will be more to come on that. So this is in public higher education, public accounting, under governmental accounting standards, they call it net position. Net position is really nothing more than equity. When you think about what is our equity comprised of, as you look at this and you go, well, you've got almost $5 billion in equity. Most of that is restricted by those red bars, and the red bars are really broken down to what's in our buildings and also then what sits in our endowment. I'll do a better job of not using two shades of red that look exactly the same next time. And then we also have some restricted funds, but then the piece that we have flexibility around is our unrestricted net assets. Again, I just show this chart in terms of liquidity growth is in line with our expenses. So really what it means is our liquidity and the size of the institution are moving together. This chart I want to spend some time on because I think it is important for us to understand. And it's one of our credit strengths is the diversity in our revenue. But if you go back to 2008 in the yellow chart, patient care was 28.5% of our revenue. And now if we roll that forward to 2018, it now represents almost 40% of our revenue. So I think it continues to change. And then thinking about gift and endowment income, yes, we can see some growth in that. It's around 7 to 8%. But even if we were to double that, most private universities are at least 15% of their revenue is coming in from those sources. So just if you say, well, we're going to look for revenue growth from gifts, yes, we should be doing that, but it's not going to be what solves all of our problems. Now I'll get into some of the metrics and break it down by our different business units. And this really gets at what I was pointing to earlier, and it goes back to 2013, and it tracks our revenue growth. The gray line that you see there is MU Healthcare, and I think with everyone else, when you look at it, we've really seen no growth on any of our campuses in revenue since 2016. UMSL, I think we have to go back to 2011 before we saw real revenue growth. So I just want you to remember when you look at our consolidated financials, you continue to see strong growth, but it is largely driven by our healthcare operation.
And Ryan, quick question. We don't expect healthcare to continue that kind of steep increase, do we?
No.
Okay.
No, I think, that's one of the things that we're concerned about is they continue to perform. I think at some point you're looking at some type of mean reversion. I mean, they're performing well outside of benchmarks for healthcare. And so for me to stand up here and say to you that, well, I just expect that to continue into perpetuity. No, and I think Jonathan's been very clear that the $100 million is not something to be viewed as an annuity. Really just trying to highlight, though, you can look at our consolidated financials and someone can say, well, you've continued to make a lot of money. It's just important to understand where we're making that return. And I think when people say, well, it feels like it's been a painful environment, this chart's why it's been painful, is we haven't been able to find revenue growth in our academic enterprise.
But the revenue is gross revenue, right?
Yeah, this is net tuition and state appropriations.
And healthcare is gross.
Yes, correct.
So to the extent that we add other locations to our MU Healthcare,
Yes.
we will have an upward trend.
We could, yes. Yes, yeah. Yes, that is
Right.
correct.
So we're not looking for long-term growth in healthcare beyond that, are we? I mean, the trend isn't going to be up organically, it would be by adding
Volume,
facilities.
yeah. Correct.
Doesn't have anything to do with what our net income or what we call margin is. That could be quite variable.
Yeah, and I think that's, you'll see that. You're absolutely right. This is looking at the actual gross revenues. If you go to the next chart, we start to talk about cash margin, and really that is it's when we get a dollar revenue and we've paid our expenses, what's left over. It does include things like capital investments and interest. And I think that's what you're probably thinking about, Curator Phillips. That margin for MU Health, I would not expect to continue to perform. And when you look at this chart, the gray line is where our AA1 medians are. The green bar is showing the average from 13 to 17. And then you can see in terms of what the 2018 performance was. And you can see MU's been constant, really pretty constant over that period of time. UMKC has lagged behind, but I do want to highlight that we did see strong improvement in terms of cost management for UMKC. They actually did reduce their cost this year, and over the last decade, that was the first time that had been accomplished at UMKC. So that's important. S&T has really outperformed the trend. The only negative that I'd highlight is their operating revenue growth slowed faster than their spending growth did for this year. UMSL for the last 3 years has been able to turn things around. Really, though, in the prior 5 years, they went from having a positive operating margin to a negative operating margin. And then I think with MUHC, you can see they've been driving a lot of the overall growth when we look on a consolidated basis. Curator Chapman.
So I'm a little slow with this kind of stuff,
Yeah.
Ryan. So can you tell me, green
Green-
bar's higher than the blue bar, good or bad?
It's just giving you an idea of how this year compared to where we were on average. So it gives you kind of an idea of was it volatile? So when you look at MU, it just means that they've been performing pretty consistently over that period of time. For UMKC, you can see that this year's performance is less than it has been for the last 5 years. Is really all it's trying to give you some context of how does this relate over time.
UMSL, because I guess what I'm looking at here is it looks like we've got one campus that's doing pretty good. That's, UMSL. I mean, is that fair to say that's done better? Or I'm just trying to make a comparison.
Yeah, I could go through, I think each of them made progress this year in different areas. And I can highlight some of the good things. If you ask me what the underlying challenge is with all 4 of our universities, it's revenue growth. So while UMKC's margin eroded, I don't think it was because of their ability to manage their cost. They actually took $5 million of cost out this year over what they did last year, but they didn't have the revenue growth. So my point is, I think there's good things that have happened.
So that's an improvement.
Yes, correct. But then we didn't have the revenue on the other side that we would have expected. So I think with UMSL, clearly what you're seeing is that green bar looks challenging for them because prior to 3 years ago, they had a 5-year period where the margin, I think by the end of the 5 years, was actually negative. So you've got some really challenging years in 13 and 14 in terms of their performance. And then over the last 3 years, they've have improved upon that. This is just giving you kind of an idea of their balance sheet strength. And it's really just an idea of the savings the campuses have. And this highlights what I said all along. We have a really strong balance sheet, which gives us flexibility to make the changes we need to make. If we choose to not make those changes over the next 5 years, this chart won't look so great. But it gives us time, it gives us ability, it actually shows the financial power of the university. And I think as you look at this, you can see MU and Missouri S&T have really strong balance sheets. MU Healthcare, while they have a really strong income statement, they're still working to build a stronger balance sheet. And I've always said this, income statements change every year, and balance sheets move over decades. So if your balance sheet's weak, it's not something that's going to recover overnight. And that's what I was really trying to talk about when I was indicating it's somewhat of a silent risk. You'll see just kind of this steady, slow erosion, and in 10 years, we'll look back and say, boy, this really changed, and we're in a really different place than we were.
Ryan, when you say liquidity to operations, what are you dividing what by what to kind of get that?
Yeah,
metric?
so that is, it just takes all of our investments, less the ones that are in the endowment, so it takes your cash plus your investments, and then divides that by our total operational expenses.
Ryan, can I ask you which campus is headed the right direction?
So this one, more so than the income statement, it moves really slowly. It's just year to year, you're not going to see huge fluctuations. The gray bar represents we're an AA1 credit. What it really represents is even with the fluctuations you saw on the previous chart, if you notice, the green bars and blue bars in general here are much closer. So it just doesn't move much. I think, I could look at each one of these individually and tell you why I think they're the way they are, but it's actually somewhat challenging to draw a comparison. But I think underlying this for the 4 universities is what feeds our balance sheet is our income statement. And I think we're working on the cost control side of this very hard and have been. What we've now got to work just as hard at is how we're going to grow revenues.
Of the different levers that you can pull for revenue growth, do you feel like, is it increasing enrollment? Is it working on tuition increases? Is it philanthropy?
Yeah.
Where are is there an easier trigger?
That's a really great question, and I think the short answer to that is there's no easy lever to pull. I think when I talked about those 3 levers of state support, tuition, and enrollment, those are all levers we've pulled. They're all levers that everyone's pulling on. And I think that's what challenges us to think about how we approach the university, and I'll call it our business model. I'm sure there's a better term for it, but this is just how I think of it differently than we have in the past.
Wouldn't it be fair to say, Ryan, that, and you've said that we're not alone in this, but I think it's important because a group of us went out to Arizona State, and there's only a few major institutions right now that have really cracked the code. We're working on it,
Yeah.
but so that everybody understands, I mean, we're in a boat with everybody else. There's only a few that have figured it out.
I think there's probably only a handful, and when I say handful, maybe 2 or 3. I think there's a lot like us that are trying to figure it out. And then honestly, there's probably some that never will have to adjust this. So those public universities that have these really massive endowments and look a lot like a private institution and have a really strong national brand, they may not have to adjust to this.
University of Michigan, for example,
Yes.
University of Virginia, some of the privates like Chicago, Harvard, Yale, they can go on the old model, but the
Yeah.
rest of us, are you saying we've got to get a new model?
Correct. And I think that's when we talk about why and how does we manage financial performance and why must it change. I don't want anyone to think that we haven't managed our financial performance. In fact, I think our deans and their fiscal officers actually do a good job of managing to the environment they've been in. But that was an environment of where money was appropriated to them, and then we asked them to not spend any more than what was given to them. And I don't say that as a bad thing. That was just how the model worked. To now where we're really moving into this environment where they have to understand how we are actually earning that revenue and how they're going to manage financial performance. So those are the things that we're going to be thinking about when I talk about this, really revenue, and also just how we do cost management is everyone's problem. It's no longer, I think in the appropriations model, it was structured largely around how do we go down to a state legislature and seek appropriations. And it's not that we're going to stop doing that, but if you think that's where we're going to go to solve the bigger problems, it's not. So we've got to think differently about it. And that's why I've also, though, said, well, we've got to focus on cost. If all we do is focused on cost, it's not a sustainable model. And I think in the old model that I talked about, largely what people think about is how do they manage cost? So if I give you a budget of $10 million, don't spend more than $10 million. What can I do to manage within that cost? And as we think about it going forward, now they're actually going to have to think about what they can do in terms of net revenue and overall revenue growth. So I think if you think about it, we've been talking about changing how we view financial performance. And we did show this slide at the last, I think at the April board meeting. But just when people have said, well, how are we going to do this? This gives you an idea of it, and then I'll get into some of the timing of it. But really working with the board to set what they want to see in terms of financial performance. But I think that also then needs to be done in conjunction with the strategic plan. So we don't just want to have financial performance for the sake of financial performance. We want to be able to perform financially so we can support the strategic goals of the university. And then really the president and myself would work with the chancellors, the provosts, and the campus CFOs to set targets for them in terms of what they need to perform financially, and that can then cascade down through the organization. So when you say, well, how are we operationalizing this? We really talk about this in terms of we want a new accountability model with shared performance goals that are shared between both the finance leadership and the academic and operational leaders. Because I can tell you, you don't want the finance leadership on their own trying to figure out how we're going to solve for the business model. But there's also then going to have to be significant incentives and consequences based on that performance. One of the things we know we have to have in there is not just simply financial performance, but there has to be mission-related performance. So you could think in terms of, we want to see a net revenue of X, we want to see revenue growth of Y, and we want to see research growth of Z. That may be a way we approach it. How we actually think about the authority to make financial decisions will be important. But we also want to have flexibility in terms of how each of our universities can implement this. Some of the things, though, that we think aren't negotiable is identifying who is accountable as far as the infrastructure to build and support this. We will be building that this year. We would like to put this out as a kind of a trial run in FY20. And then in 2021, we would have this new accountability model up and running. And the reason this takes time is really on this next chart, and I'll go here, is we can do a lot of this today ad hoc. We can do it through spreadsheets. We don't have systems in place. Our entire financial system was set up to really just track how resources were spent. So it's not easy for me to go into our financial system. And what I can tell you in our financial system is where we spent the money and what we spent it on. But I can't look at that and say, well, it generated revenue of X and it generated net revenue of Y. Now I can take that data and we can calculate, and I think all of our campuses have been working on this, but it all lives in spreadsheets. And so if we're going to start holding academic leaders and unit leaders accountable, we've got to have a place where they can go and actually track this and think about it. So really, the biggest gap that we have to fill is understanding revenue generation. I think that's something that we haven't really had to think about, and people have to start understanding when we make decisions, what's the impact on revenue, not just in terms of what is the dollars it's going to take to do this. With that, I'd ask if there's any questions.
None? I do have one. Did you earlier say the gray line represented basically our bond rating?
Correct.
And that combines MU Health with our academic
Yes,
units?
yes.
So,
That's an A1 higher education credit rating.
right. And you had a slide, I think it was, you don't have to go back to this one, but 234, which shows, the title of it is Mix of Revenue Continues Healthcare Shift. And it shows over time, actually, an increasing on 10-year and 5-year basis.
Mm-hmm.
And then the one I want you to put up, and let's talk about a little bit, is 236. We had some discussion on that, but this shows the percentage of margin
Mm-hmm.
and the relative stability compared this year to the last 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
But what would our bond rating be if we didn't have MU Healthcare as a part of it with their margins? You can't tell how much margin that throws off because this is stability. But would we have the same bond rating if we didn't have MU Healthcare? And I know that they give us dings because of risk, because it's riskier than
Yeah.
academia, but on balance, do you know what the answer to that is?
So I'll give you the best answer I can. One is I don't know exactly what it would be. MU healthcare in general, as we're viewed as a higher education credit, is either viewed as a credit positive or pretty quickly a credit negative. It doesn't typically kind of set in the middle and is neutral. And with the strong performance they've continued to have, it's largely a positive, but then you're right, from an industry perspective, it presents additional risk. So I know that if it was a standalone credit, if our healthcare enterprise was, it wouldn't be an AA1 credit. I could probably get you a better answer to your question of what would our credit be without MU Health. It might very well still be AA1. The likelihood of it staying there, though, I don't know if I'd feel as comfortable with that.
Interesting answer. I would have assumed differently
I
because.
mean, it is a credit positive for us right now.
Right. I would think that our credit rating would not be as good if we didn't have it because of their recent history, 7-year history.
Yeah.
Of positive operating,
Yeah.
net operating income.
But if we flipped, I guess the only counter I'd say that if we took the financials of a higher education credit and the financials of a healthcare enterprise or healthcare credit, and everything was equal on those, the lower rated credit's going to be the healthcare credit, just because of the things.
Because of risk.
Yes, yeah.
Ryan, we've talked a little bit today about accountability, and your slide is the first that I've seen that has both incentives and consequences, those words in them. Can you talk a little bit about what we mean by that, and also how culture can be changed with training, or, I mean,
Yeah.
what resources may be available to people to shift this to this different business model?
Yeah, and I think if you read through the paper, we talk a lot about, I think we're moving quickly. At the same time, some will read that and say it's going to take you 3 years to do this. It's a big shift in our mindset. As far as what consequences and incentives mean, that's when I say we've got work to do this next year, it's defining what that means. I can tell you, though, if we say we put an accountability model in place and there really is no incentive to perform or consequences for not performing, it quickly will be ignored. So it's something we're going to have to work with the universities on, is what does that need to look like? So part of it is designing that model, and I actually think, well, it's challenging too, and then there's the whole technical side of, do we actually have a system in place that could support something like this, and we don't have that today. So that'll be where a lot of our focus lies in this next year.
Any other questions for Ryan before we move to the action item, the first action item? All right, next Ryan will present the project approval of the Student Classroom Center on the Missouri University S&T campus.
Yeah, and so if Chancellor Maples has anything to add, or if you have any questions, I'm sure he'll be happy to answer them. But this is a $7.6 million project. It'll be $1 million in gifts. I think they had $1 million in their maintenance and repair funds, and then about 5.6 coming out of their campus reserves. When we went through the capital planning process, they had talked about the third phase of shrink. And one of the things that they've identified is and he talked about it earlier today, they don't have large classroom space. I think they have only one classroom that can hold over 76 students on campus. And so with this, that'll allow for that. It's also reducing the need of the shrink phase 3 expansion. So I look at this and go, it really is part of what was in their original capital plan. They're just saying, how do they attack it in a way that they can live within their means. I think there's parts of shrink that without some large outside gift, we're not going to be able to get done, but this will be good for the students on the campus, and I'd be happy to answer any questions the board might have.
So, on paragraph 3 on the project approval explanation, if I'm reading it correctly, it includes 5 classrooms. This is an addition, not a renovation or a repurposing. 2 60-seat, 1 300-seat. I'm not sure that's actually 3. But we heard at lunch today that the students are complaining about being in large lecture rooms, that they don't feel that they have relationships with their professors. I'm just going to make a comment that I'm in favor of the project, but that's because S&T has run out of room and their capacity for current classroom needs. But for our other campuses, I would hope that we wouldn't be building new large classrooms except in special circumstances, looking to the future, that we would be looking more toward online distance and trying to reduce the number of large lecture courses.
And I think that's a great question and is actually something we'll talk about tomorrow as we talk about the capital plans. One of the things that we're going to have to contemplate, and we touched on it last year, is really thinking about a no new net square footage policy. I think S&T in this case is an exception. They've had 23% enrollment growth, but what I'm talking about is even as we bring forward projects, if it's not renovating something, we ought to be looking at how do we reduce our space footprint somewhere else, because that's going to, one is, it addresses, I think, some of the things you're talking about, but also if we just keep building our footprint when we can't maintain the footprint that we have, we're just adding to the problem.
If I can add as well, Chancellor Maples consolidated all of the room reservations centrally. Prior to that, departments had access to their own classrooms that only they were assigned to use. And so after doing all of that, they found out that they still have classroom needs. And the other universities, I believe, are moving in that direction, because the last thing we want to do is build more classrooms when there are classrooms available. And this goes to accountability. So there will be space audits that will be done before new classrooms or other laboratories are built at a university. So Curator Phillips, good point.
And you could have classes on weekends, God forbid, or in the evenings. You don't want to be an evening school, but there are all sorts of ways of making use of our current classrooms.
And summers.
And summers.
All right. Are there any other questions on the Student Classroom Learning Center at S&T? Then may I have a motion from the committee to approve it?
So moved.
Second?
Great. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay? All right, no abstentions, I assume? All right, sounds like we have a unanimous vote. Mr. Chairman, on behalf of the Finance Committee, I move to approve the Missouri University of Science and Technology Student Classroom Learning Center project.
Could I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Come on.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? It passes. Motion passes. Thank you.
Great, one more. We have a second action item. Brian will present the information for the architect engineering hiring for the Translational Precision Medicine Complex on the MU campus.
Yes, thank you, Curator Burnsick. I don't have a fancy presentation to walk through, but I know Chancellor Cartwright, Vice Chancellor Ward, Dean LeBoa, and others have spent a lot of time to get this ready today. We worked with JLL to do the program planning study. What we're bringing forward to you today is to ask for your approval to move forward with the AE firm, Burns and McDonald. We would also like to engage them as the project. Given the magnitude of this project, we'd like to have them on as a project manager as well from the outside. Right now, through what we've learned, it'd be approximately a $220 million project. At the November meeting, perhaps we would like to bring the funding plan back to the board for approval. With that, I'd entertain any questions you might have.
I have a question. When you say project manager, that's going to be managing the building project?
Correct.
Are we going to have a project manager who's solely devoted to all that we're doing anticipating the building? Somebody who has full-time responsibility for that?
So Chancellor Cartwright and I are going to be working closely with Mark McIntosh and Elizabeth Laboa, who's been appointed as a Vice Chancellor for Strategic Partnership. And she is going to play the key role in developing not only the strategic plans, working with all of the schools and the universities in those three key areas, but also developing the operations plan. So she is going out to Northwestern University, to Oregon and Georgia Tech to learn from the best practices that they have at their similar facilities to come and develop that plan for us moving forward.
I take that as a no.
She's going to take a significant amount of her time leading that effort. But if we're going to have a separate person leading that effort, the answer to that is no. The reason being is Elizabeth Laboa has the managerial experience, but more importantly, the experience in that area of research. And that is so critical to bring the faculty members along to lead this project.
Could I ask you a question? Are we getting any external help at all? Again, I have tremendous respect for Dean Laboa and Dr. Choi. I want to express the same concern that I think Curator Phillips is doing, is that this is a new undertaking that the University of Missouri is making. There hasn't been a research building built at the University of Missouri Columbia since 2002. I don't know how the rest of the board feels. I feel like this is almost a make it or break it decision. I think we have a game-changing decision if we do it right. If we have delays, if we're late into the market of the TPMC, if we don't, I would like to see it accelerated even. We've talked about alternative financing to accelerate it. And I do wonder if we have all the support from people who have done it before, either internally or externally, to move this right.
So, Chairman Steelman, are you referring to the project manager to build the building and finance the building, or the scientific and operations leadership?
I'm talking about both. I'm talking about, we have a project manager for building, which I think is an excellent, we haven't got him yet, but that's the intention. I'm also talking about how do we get the external help for programming an operation of this size. Dean Laboa has tremendous ability. You have programmed, I think, at least the additive manufacturing at UConn, or took part in it. But my own belief on managing these is that you've got more than enough to do. Dean Laboa does have other things to do, and I wonder whether we should not be looking for at least some external help.
So what we'll do is let me speak with Chancellor Cartwright and Mark McIntosh and Elizabeth Laboa and come back with a plan that we can share with you at the November meeting. And prior to that, we'll speak with members of the board to discuss our concepts that will be presented.
And I want to make it clear, I'm not saying you can't do it, but I think the board is very invested in this, as you are.
As
we would
all
like,
of us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I want to follow David's comments that that's a great team that we have.
No question.
But you're all going to be part-time, and somebody needs to put all that together.
I would like to know the rest of the board's view on this, if anyone wanted to weigh in.
No, I would agree. I think that this is such an important project, and while it's a high priority, we need someone who's hopefully done something like this before and can be a consultant. And I think you'll find the right person.
Curator Burnsick, you're chairman of finance. Do you have any?
You know, I don't know exactly what we mean in a role of a project manager versus a consultant. There's part administrative work here of collecting everyone's ideas and keeping people on track and making sure that they're getting information from all the different sources of folks who are pitching in and providing input. It just seems like an awfully big project that would be delegated to someone else besides. I think everyone at the top has to be involved. I'm not suggesting that that's somehow an abdication and a whole delegation to someone else. But in terms of the help and the execution, I think there's going to be a lot of moving pieces. Having only, my work at Express Scripts to compare it to, and the multiple integrations that we've done over the years, it certainly takes a team.
So, yeah.
I just offer, the one thing, and we had outside help to get to where we're at today, the programming plan for this, I mean, part of getting this done on time, we wouldn't have brought this to you today if we didn't have a strong programming plan. And really, from this day forward, that if we want to get this done on time, I want to be clear, the program is locked in for this. And we did have outside help to get the programming for this done.
Well, that's the initial plan, but you have to have somebody.
Correct.
We haven't yet talked about fundraising, and I see Tom's here, but you've got to coordinate what your plans are with the fundraising,
And
what your opportunities are, and you don't know what the opportunities are because you haven't yet really had your planning. I think you had a telephone conference, but my point is that we're in September, and we're asking for money, and we need somebody that coordinates all of that. Moon, I think, is overall responsible, but I do think a project of this size, and it's critical, this is our litmus test for this kind of thing, that we need somebody who spends full time working with that team. That's my thought.
So that's a good point. So what we'll do is we'll gather our team, our leadership team, and bring a credible plan for you to that we can present to you in November or earlier if we want to get it done.
I mean, I think the exciting part with this is the first step in actually getting this project moved. I mean, there's been a lot of work to get here, but to me, it's very exciting from that standpoint of from this day forward, we'll be moving on this project.
And I want to echo what Curator Phillips said. We think we have a tremendous team, and we think this is, I hope, why the board is doing this and is unanimously in support of it and continues to support the philanthropy on it. But of all the projects that any of us on this board, including new members, have quite a time to serve, may see, this may be the project that determines whether the University of Missouri at Columbia is a great research university again.
Just a quick question. The architect, engineer hire that you guys, that was picked, do we have prior experience with them, with any campus doing any type of projects previously?
Yeah, we've had significant experience with them, and I think they're intimately familiar with this project as well.
So we used Burns and Mac to actually do the initial programming. All of the initial programming for the building 2 years ago when we started the project was done by them. They brought in experts from all over the country for every aspect that we told them that we were thinking about. Imaging, vivarium, dry lab space, wet lab space. So we have a lot of confidence in them.
Okay.
All right, if there's no further questions for Ryan, may I have a motion from the committee to recommend to approve Burns and McDonnell Engineering Company to be hired as the architect engineer for the translational precision medicine complex on the MU campus?
So moved.
Second.
Great. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. No abstentions. Mr. Chairman, on behalf of the Finance Committee, I move that Burns and McDonnell Engineering Company from Kansas City be hired as the architect engineer for the TPMC on the MU campus.
Any seconds?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? And the motion passes. And I am looking forward, President Choi and Ryan, to having further discussions on how the board, not just at board meetings, but whatever board member who wants to be involved in upkeep, be able to do so. Did I just get removed from my position? Okay.
I'm not going to close the meeting, right? Because tomorrow we're going to reconvene. And before I say we're done for today, and I'm still in charge, I want everyone to stand up and stretch.
I'm going to stand up.
Just for a second. Can't sit all day like this, people. We just can't. We have a healthcare facility that's trying to keep people well.
All right,
Right.
let's do it. All right, let's do it.
Good idea. I'm gonna get some coffee.
That's good.
All right, can we take
Look at that leadership she's showing. She's got everybody standing up and stretching.
That would be nice.
This must have added 10 minutes onto everyone's life.
Senator Farmer, you're up. Yep. All right. Okay. Whoever wants to sit down, we're now going to, or you don't have to sit down, you can keep standing up and stretching. But Curator Farmer, you are up next with the,
This is Jamie Farmer.
yeah, oh, I know, I'm trying to find where it is. Oh, I messed my schedule.
Page 4 of the agenda.
Oh, there it is. External Affairs, Marketing, and Advancement Committee.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman Steelman. The External Affairs and Marketing Advancement Committee has 4 informational items today. Over the next few board meetings, you'll be hearing from each of our marketing and communications divisions at each of the 4 universities. Today, we will be starting with Missouri S&T and Mizzou, and our following meetings will cover UMSL and UMKC. So with that, I'd like to invite Andy Carriega, the Executive Director for Marketing and Communications at Missouri S&T, to come to the podium, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's exciting and a pleasure to be here to present to you about Marketing Missouri S&T and what we do in our marketing communications efforts at S&T. I've been at S&T for 27 years now, and it's an exciting place to work. We have a lot of fun promoting this university and raising the visibility of it. And it's a great place, as all of the campuses and the universities, I should say, of the University of Missouri system. I'm also a Mizzou grad, so I have the pride of being an alum of that university. So we have an almost 150-year history and really a 150-year brand at Missouri S&T. When we were founded in 1870 as the University of Missouri School of Mines and Metallurgy. And oftentimes the best ambassadors for our brand, I think, are our students. So when we talk about what our message is, I like to go back to this quote from an 1878 graduate, L.R. Grable, who said, "We present ourselves as defenders of the new education whose adherents work not only with their heads, but with their hands, who delight to unravel the mysteries and solve the problems which nature lays before us." That's really what Missouri S&T is all about, that experiential, hands-on, applied approach to education, that land-grant mission that's been serving us for almost 150 years. So that's our 150-year-old brand promise. The challenge, of course, is how do you make a maturing, aging brand relevant today? So we have that brand promise, and it is still relevant today. And it's exemplified through these elements of our brand experience: the remarkable return on investment, the hands-on and applied learning, our broad range of engineering programs. We have 15 undergraduate engineering programs and 18 engineering programs that offer graduate degrees, including PhDs. We have very strong niche programs in systems engineering, explosives engineering, and some other newer fields, as well as technical communications, which is a niche for us as well. And we are a distinctive public research university. There are only a handful of universities similar to us, and I'll talk a little bit about some of our comparators in a few minutes in terms of who we look at when we're talking about our brand and how we identify ourselves. And so how this is personified, we do it through groups like our design teams, like our Mars Rover team that won the International University Rover Challenge in 2017, international champions. This year they were national champions. They came in second in the world, but they beat several great universities to become #1 in the US. We do it through applied learning in the laboratories. Rachel Nixon, who works in our chemistry, an undergraduate in our chemistry department, who's working with Rixing Wang on some nanotechnology work in chemistry. We do it through the great jobs that our graduates get. Zach Ellis, for a great job he got with Microsoft, a recent graduate. And with the research that is applied, the innovations that are applied nationally and internationally, but also in our own state, that's translated from the labs into the marketplace. In this case, this is Miragen, which is, many of you have heard of Miragen. It is a cotton candy-like fiber, but it's a glass fiber that is used to speed the healing of open wounds. Very important for diabetics and others who have challenges with healing of open wounds, and the military, of course, is interested in this. It was one of our 17 innovations of 2017. We are established, and we have 3 units in our marketing communications office. We have our creative services, which I refer to as the visual group. That's our photography, graphic design, videography. Our web and digital, that's the virtual, and our strategic communications, the verbal. And we really work together, and this is our mission statement, to build, manage, and promote the S&T brand experience to further our university's mission and strategic goals. So it's a very mission-driven approach that we take in our work, and a strategic, plan-driven approach. Recent website, just to give you an example of how these 3 units integrate and work together. You can see here the creative services, the visual comes into play on our website when you see the visual imagery, the design. You can see it in our strategic communications, the verbal, the writing, the content creation. We're very much a content marketing type of operation here, and a lot of brand storytelling is our emphasis for a variety of audiences. And then our web and digital group with the web, social media, usability, et cetera. So that's how we sort of put it all together in how we develop our marketing and communications. We have this brand building cycle gives you a sense of how we approach the challenge to market the university. We start with a strategy, we build from that on creative development, a marketing plan, we test, refine, and refresh that plan, and go back to market research to inform the brand strategy over and over. So market research is a big component of our current brand platform. In 2014 and 2015, we undertook a comprehensive brand research project. It was the first one since our name change in 2008. And this is what we found. We found that awareness varies by audience. We found that, by and large, we are well known among prospective undergraduate students who are interested in STEM-focused degrees, but not as well known among prospective graduate students, including PhDs. We also found out that we are recognized for academic excellence, and that we do meet prospects' expectations in terms of what they are looking for in terms of a university. So if they're looking for a university where they can get involved and where they have great outcomes, we meet those expectations. We found congruence with the external audiences that we talked to with the internal audiences. Innovative and respected were 2 words that came up in the research that we did. We provided a list of 20 modifiers, 20 adjectives, and asked folks to pick 5. And throughout all of the audiences that we talked to, innovative and respected rose to the top, both in terms of prospective students who we asked, when you're looking at a university, what type of university do you want to enroll in? Innovative and respected were at the top. And we asked our current students, what kind of university is Missouri S&T? Both undergraduate and graduate, innovative and respected came to the top. And we also found that our alumni are proud miners. Over 90% said they were either very happy or extremely happy with their experience at Missouri S&T. So that's the foundation of the research that we did and how that informed our brand strategy. So we took that market research, we distilled it, and we looked at what does that mean about Missouri S&T. And so this is how we've built it. This is the brand platform. You won't see this on a billboard, you won't see it in a brochure, but this is what informs the marketing work that we do. The idea that we build upon our heritage of discovery, creativity, and innovation across all academic and research disciplines, so that our community is inspired and ready to pursue and solve the world's grand challenges. From there, we went into a creative development stage. So we did the market research, we developed a brand strategy, and now we started looking at the creative. And this is the fun stuff that we got to work on, right? We did our video, the Miners Dig Deeper video, which I showed in an earlier meeting with this group, or with the committee. Of course, we've taken that platform, we've used it with a visual identity that's been refreshed in 2015. And now, very briefly, show you the marketing plan that is based on the research. And this is the busiest slide you'll see in my presentation. But I put it there, and you have it in your materials. You can see that we have these 8 goals. They're all focused on audiences. Most of them are attached to the market research that we did. Some are attached to strategies that we have. And then we look at the measurement. How are we going to tell if we've succeeded or not? And we've also attached each of these to the compacts that we have in our strategic plan, both at the University of Missouri level and at the Missouri S&T level. And then we go back to testing, refining, and refreshing all the work that we've been doing. And part of that testing, refining, and refreshing goes back to the marketing dashboard project that we've been working on. But a few things I wanted to talk about related to that is we look at brand reach on our team. We really look at that through web traffic, social media, and earned media, things that we can track pretty accurately with some tools that we have. We also look at share of voice, and we look at some schools that are like us. One of them is what I would call an aspirational school. The other 2 are very similar to us. The other 2 we were all established as schools of mines back in the day, and we all have similar size. We're in similar geographic areas. So the aspirational one is Georgia Tech. Colorado School of Mines and Michigan Tech are the 2 that are more like us in terms of the demographics. So when you look at share of voice in earned media, for example, so you see, you can see the aspirational university, which is also a Division I university. In terms of what they hear, what you see in earned media, they are the biggest piece of the onion ring there, right? We're at 3.4%, which is comparable to our other comparators, Michigan Tech and Colorado School of Mines, yet slightly smaller. When we take Georgia Tech out of that equation and look at it, we're in a little bit better shape at 20.8%. When you look at share of voice on social media, we do better. And this is, by the way, this was for July 1st through August 31st. We took this because it's sort of during the summer lull, but then you have the spike of the beginning of the school year. So we can have sort of look at that in a two-month period. Once again, Georgia Tech is the big one. And then when you remove Georgia Tech from the equation, you see that our share of voice against our competitors or comparators is really strong. And share of voice, think of this as market share, similar to when the auto industry looks at sales, right? They look at the pie chart and what percentage of the pie chart do they get. So we're looking at share of voice. And I wanted to share this because this is something that we look at internally that I want you all to be aware of, because we are taking a look at those institutions that are similar to us as well as those that we would aspire to. Finally, I just wanted to briefly mention the sort of the overarching philosophy that we have with our content marketing. It's called the PESO model, and it has to do with paid media, owned media, shared media, and earned media. It probably should be called the Sept model because we focus on owned media first. Those are the things that we produce, that we create, and that we have more control over in terms of distribution, in terms of how it is, where it was received. And then we go to the shared, that's the social media aspect of the content that we create. Earned media is when we get media coverage, news media coverage, and then paid media is when we buy ads. So that's essentially, those are essentially the four. If you looked at it as a pyramid, you would see earned is the smallest top of the pyramid. I'm sorry, paid at the top of the pyramid, and owned at the bottom. So that's just in a nutshell the PESO model, and this is the philosophy that we have as we move forward with our visibility and brand marketing. Any questions? Or anything you'd like me to go over? Thank you.
Didn't Georgia Tech several years ago do something statewide in terms of connectivity with schools in Georgia and also with private industry? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Unfortunately, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know if Chancellor Maples, being from Georgia, is familiar with this or not.
I'm not sure about that. I know Georgia State has done an awful lot of work.
I'm at Georgia Tech.
I know Georgia State has done a lot, but I don't
Okay.
know about Georgia Tech.
All right. I just,
Sure. Oh, well, I'm sorry, I don't know. We look at Georgia Tech because when we were doing a lot of our planning, we were like, who's the gold standard for technological research universities that are public? And Georgia Tech is the one that we came upon, so.
I have one other question.
Sure.
Last year, we did some special marketing for the MU campus, in part to help increase the enrollment, and I think Chancellor Cartwright and his team did a really great job. I guess that is maybe partly because of the investment we did in the marketing.
That has helped, right?
Was there anything that we learned from that that you were able to use in your marketing program? Did you have any interface with the consultant that we used and how that was developed?
Mainly as an observer, but also I think we're going to see much more of that collaboration moving forward in terms of how we work with Cameron and her operation. So in this particular case, and not so much, but one of the other areas of emphasis for us has been really on raising visibility of the brand and reputation of the brand, more so than enrollment, but obviously enrollment is very important and is increasingly important. So we're having some conversations at S&T now in terms of the marketing operation writ large there.
So it sounds like this was a campus-based investment, not something that the university funded. Is that right, Chris?
Yes, that was, what are you talking, for his
Yeah.
presentation? Yes, it was campus space.
It was, and it began in 2014. We did an RFP process, and in 2014, we began the research. And in fall 2014 and spring 2015, we did the market research. And then based on that, we developed this brand platform.
So that really preceded the MU special investment.
It did.
Thanks.
Thank you, Andy.
All right, thank you.
Up next, we have our second informational item, and I'd like to invite Cameron Farwell, our Chief Marketing and Communications Officer for MU and the system, will provide us an overview over her initiatives since she has taken the reign.
Thanks so much. This is my first Board of Curators meeting, so thanks for having me. And I think I've met most everyone, but I am the Chief Marketing Communications Officer for Mizzou and for the system. This presentation, I'll be focusing on I'll have my Mizzou hat on. This is focusing on the communications marketing effort for the university. There are a lot of things I could talk about, but I wanted to hold to the time here and really focus on two areas. And I'll be talking about what the results are that we've seen from the 160/90 effort, and also what we're doing to build up our in-house capacity to be able to communicate. So before I get started, Curator Farmer asked me to talk a little bit about my perspective as I came into this situation. I've been watching higher education and marketing efforts from a professional perspective outside of higher education, and then spent time within it. So I was a journalist for 20 years, completing that part of my professional life at the Dallas Morning News. And there I was in charge of their education report. And so that and at the time, the Dallas Morning News was a top 5 national newspaper. And so I was getting a lot of the marketing and communications coming from the various institutions. So on the receiving end, I could see what was working and what wasn't in terms of impact. And then as I transitioned into higher education communications, I worked at University of Texas at Dallas, and then at the University of Pittsburgh. And I think I got a look at how people are doing this. And finally, a personal aspect of it is I've had 2 kids go through college in recent years, and I have the stacks of mail to prove it. So being on the receiving end of all kinds of marketing, it was interesting to come into the situation here and look at what we were doing. And I can tell you that it was a really smart investment with a goal of driving enrollment to invest in 160 over 90. Because what you ended up getting was a cutting edge approach that other universities are struggling to get to. And what drives that struggle is that a lot of university communications marketing teams are focused on graphic design that makes beautiful things that are mailed to you. And I think we all know that getting to prospective students and their parents, they are not looking for it in the mail. And so most of the strategy that you'll see from 160 over 90 is focused on where the kids are living, and their parents are living here too. So a lot of the efforts that 160 over 90 employed are digital efforts. And most, as I said, most universities are struggling to shift from the paper graphic design mail model to a digital model. And so not only were we able to use 160 over 90 to get into the most strategic communications out there, but it's going to inform us as we develop our own marketing capacity to hire people who are already good at this. So as we get into this, let's see. Oh, there, oop, okay. 160 over 90 came onto the scene before I arrived here in September, and I think the goal was clear that they were here to very quickly drive enrollment. So usually a firm like 160 over 90 would develop a brand and then bring all the pieces together in terms of strategy and then begin to roll out product. Well, we needed to move faster than that. And so 160 over 90, in some ways you could say they moved a little bit backwards. They started putting messaging out there and building the brand as they went along. So we call it the triage campaign, was really to get materials out there very quickly, focused on driving enrollment. And then as that was rolling out, they worked on developing the full brand, which really didn't roll out until May. So I think these numbers tell you a lot of stories. And overall, you'll see that the whole campaign put together, they estimate that there were 182.4 million impressions. Now, I think impressions is a little bit of a soft number. It's how they compile that number is that they tabulate all the potential audiences that all these efforts may have gotten to. So I think of it, that if you're scrolling through Facebook, maybe you saw one of those things go by, maybe you didn't. So it's the potential audience. So I think that's a strong number, but I would say it's a soft number. But these other numbers are hard numbers that we should all be proud of, and I think this shows you that the investment was a solid investment. And I don't think enough attention has been spent on increasing enrollment by 13%. We had census figures came in on Monday, and they're still finalizing numbers, but from what I'm hearing, that 13% is probably going to hold. That is amazing in 1 year. I know it's the strongest gain in 10 years here, but compared to other universities around the country, that is a dramatic gain. And if you consider that many universities are seeing declining enrollment, that is a real accomplishment that I don't think has really gotten its due. And then if you look at the growth in the areas where where the marketing efforts were focused, dramatic improvements. Southwest Missouri, Kansas City, Central Missouri, that's in 1 year. Those are hard numbers to move. So how did 160 over 90 do this? They focused on digital. We didn't see all of this because we weren't part of the target audiences in many cases. So these ads were running on social media, in Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. They were very successful in paid search. So when you go to Google, ads pop up if you're the right demographic. Very targeted messaging, messaging that actually follows IP addresses, where mom and dad might be getting messaging focused on value and what kind of jobs students would get after graduation, and the student is getting messaging about how interesting it's going to be on campus and what kind of experiences they're going to have. And those messages are going into the same household focused on the different audience, so very strategic messaging. We also found that we outperformed paid search rates by the average paid search rates by 119%. And Pandora, for some reason, our Pandora ads were very popular, so we're reinvesting in that, performing 400% above what is typical. So our campaign is designed to drive enrollment, but it's also designed to drive what we call sentiment, which is how do people feel about Mizzou in the overall public? Because we know that that's important, that everyone is committed to Mizzou being as strong as it can be. So some of the advertising is focused on physical signs on buildings, on buses, and we'll be seeing more of that this year. I hope that many of you have seen these videos. We have 2 videos. One is a 30-second spot, and you'll be seeing that during the SEC games and on television soon. And then we have also pushed these on social media. So the anthem video is the longer, 90-second. We released this during the chancellor's speech a few weeks ago. In its first 6 days, it had 135,000 views. And I like this number even better, the 17,000 people that responded to that. As you know from your surfing on social media, you don't respond unless you're really moved. To have that in 6 days was a really nice result. And then the 30-second video has been out there, and in its first month, it also had really strong results. So overall, what we're looking at for the year coming up is we are in the middle of the push for enrollment. So there are ads and messages going out to prospective students and their parents right now. And what will happen is that will soon click into what we call yield media, which is once we have given them information about enrolling, then yield media focuses on closing the deal for those students who've been accepted but haven't sealed the deal yet. And then sentiment media will be running through a long period of time, really just to raise the profile. And then we are also working on a redesign to the front pages of the MU website, because the website is a really important marketing tool specifically for prospective students and parents. That's really who it's for. So other tactics you'll be seeing, we'll have some wallscapes in our key markets. You will see messaging in places like Chicago and Houston. Geofencing is very new to this world. Essentially, it's where large groups of people are gathering. We will be feeding ads to them that focus on the IP addresses that are at that gathering, and then those ads will follow that audience. So we have geofencing lined up for about 30 events where young people will be gathering, or key audiences for us. And then paid search and paid social, that has been so successful for us. We'll definitely be continuing that.
Can you tell us what geofencing is?
Geofencing essentially targets a geographic area and all the IP addresses that are in it. So when you notice that you've just been shopping somewhere and then suddenly you get advertising, if you're at REI or something, and then you're suddenly getting marketing for hiking boots, that's geofencing. So we're also going to be much more visual this year. We'll see billboards throughout the state. Some of these will be focused on enrollment. Some of them will be focused on overall messaging. So looking at what 160/90 has brought us, we have a toolbox full of materials that we're now sharing with the different units at the university so they can use it in their communications. And then at the same time, we're trying to build up our in-house capabilities so that we can continue some of these tactics on our own, as well as the other parts of communicating and marketing. So these are the functions that we really need to be strong on. We need to have good print and digital marketing. We need to support the messages of the executive leadership. We need to be strong on media relations and issues management. Social media is very important as it delivers a lot of our messaging, and then internal communications and web. And you need to be good at all of these, and you also need to have all of these things coordinated with each other. You need to select your messages so that they're coming out, all of those channels, all aligned, all on the topics that you want to drive. So there's a philosophical part of this, and then there's how you're actually going to execute. So philosophically, we have to prioritize our top messages. I tell people that you should think about the 3 things that you want in everyone else's head, and then just focus on those 3 things, because if you tell them 12 things, they won't remember any of them. So we have to prioritize right here, right now, what are our top 3 messages? And we will use those to align our strategies. So once we know what we want to say, then we need to consider our audiences and figure out how they're going to hear us. And that's important, because that's the multi-channel aspect of this, is that you've got to talk to the different audiences in the way that they will hear it and understand what those 3 to 4 messages are. So we'll be looking at how we're currently communicating, and we're probably going to need to develop new publications, whether digital or print or otherwise, and we're going to need to redesign them so that they can travel on devices like this, and press releases don't. So we need to redevelop a lot of the ways that we're communicating. And then repetition is good. It's okay if you've already seen the video and you see it again. I hope you do. Actually, we'll be playing it in a bit. So repetition is good. You want all the audiences to hear things. In marketing, they say it doesn't really sink in unless people have heard it 8 times. So we want all of our channels to be saying the same thing again and again. Then tactically, we need to build up our capacity in a few areas. And right off the bat, we need to focus on web design. We have a lot of web functionality, but we don't have design that drives the marketing messages that we need it to have. So that is an area that I'll be focusing on. And then building the marketing team that will support the kind of work that 160/90 has helped us get started. And then building support across the campuses and between the communicators on the campuses is really important, so that we have a lot of communicators out in the schools, and we need to all be working together to have one voice for the whole university. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll be needing to develop some communication vehicles that effectively deliver these messages that we all commit to. And none of it works if we don't do a good job of telling the story. So we have to support our main messages with what I call proof points. And what proof points are experiences that you tell, that people have, that drive your key messages. If our key message is that our students have experiential learning, we have to show experiential learning. And when we're choosing stories to do on the different aspects of our university, we need to choose stories that drive those few messages that we have chosen as important, so that we can drive home the message. So my last thing is to show the 90-second video. I've been told this group hasn't seen it in its entirety. What's good about this video is it does just what I said. It chooses a message and it proves it up and it makes you feel something.
It wasn't fate, happenstance, or even luck that got us here, but a hunger for something everlasting. A way to see what others couldn't, to discover the beauty in perseverance, and to find solutions in the unexpected. Here, in the middle of the middle, where soybeans meet skyscrapers, people meet possibility, and Missouri pride runs from the Ozark Mountains to the northern plains. We cross boundaries to gain perspective, embrace differences to get closer to a solution, research this, solve that, find a way to turn this all around, then challenge everything we thought we knew. Because it's not enough to just talk about what's possible.
You gotta show me.
Show me. Show me.
Show me the world through someone else's eyes, and what happens when chemists tackle cancer. Show me every side of the story. and a new way to keep our planet strong. Show me how to turn research into reality and get a look at my career while I'm still taking classes. Show me how to go fast, how to find the truth, how to thrive. Show me what you've got.
Is that video's on YouTube, I take it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and please share. We have that video just about everywhere, and we'll be pushing it out further. It's a really nice piece that I've had people come say, I got teary watching that. That's what we've needed to see all that time. So I think it sets a standard for what we should try to do when we're telling stories in all the different ways we tell them. You have to focus on the people, and you have to make it feel like, I get that. And it has to have that core message.
I thought your explanation of marketing in the 21st century was really interesting. And for a lot of us that aren't that tied in digitally, it really is, I think, visionary. And I should have saved my question for the guy from S&T for you, actually, because what I was trying to get at was this is a whole process that are we going to be able to replicate the digital aspect of this, which is particularly interesting to students, let's say traditional students, I think, but increasingly for everybody. Are we going to be able to take that to the other campuses as well? It sounds like S&T has their brand in mind, and hopefully that's an easy question. And then secondly, will there be a time in the future when we can do marketing that highlights for particular centers of excellence or unique opportunities like S&T Experiential Learning that has the MU flavor, or the Missouri? You had both Kansas City and St. Louis in the MU Mizzou film. But that's actually part of the enrollment initiative that we've been using. But what about S&T and experiential learning? Are we going to be able to do that and also have University of Missouri? But if you want to be sure you get an experiential learning dose in your college career, that's the place to go.
I think that already the communicators at the 4 universities are working closely. We're going to talk later about the dashboard project that we worked on together. And our hope is that we can do a better job of sharing best practices. And it is hard to move operations that have been focused on print material and shifting to this because no one in the house knows about this. But that's one of the really great positives that comes out of hiring a 160/90 is they do this for a bunch of universities, and this is their world, and they know the most forward-thinking strategies. So we not only get the benefit of them doing this, but we get the knowledge of what kinds of people we need to hire. So I think I expect that we'll continue to watch our results from what we're doing at Mizzou, and in talking with my fellow communicators at the other campuses, we're going to be sharing best practices. We all are dealing with the same challenges, so we're going to borrow each other's strategies, and I'm certain that they're going to be interested in getting in this space because it's less expensive than other kinds of marketing. It's less expensive than printing glossy productions, and it's less expensive than newspaper advertising or other things. So you can get a lot for your money working digitally.
And you're actually not only campus-based, but you're also systems communications, so you're the one that's going to do the best sharing, best practice. Well, I think that's really
No, I think that is an important part of my job with the system is to help us work together. And communicators naturally want to work together because we have the same challenges, and it always helps to be on the edge of what's new so that in this changing environment of how information is shared, we have to be helpers to each other in making sure that we're agile and adapting.
So Cameron has only been in her job for about 2 months, and she's really done a tremendous job of not only making sure that the office is running very efficiently, but thinking about priorities, but also sharing with the other campuses. And the beauty of the geofencing type of advertising is that you get results, you get to know what the outcomes are. When you send out a packet of brochures, you don't know if they were being read or tossed in the garbage can. And so the other universities, especially as they're trying to grow enrollment, need to focus on that activity, especially if they have their brand already set up. And it's so much more efficient.
I'm getting the KU logo on my CNN. I don't watch Fox, but I watch CNN. But on my news feed on my iPhone, I was just saying.
Yeah.
But it's KU. I'd love to see MU on there.
That's paid search.
So
Yeah.
can we geofence him? Yes, let's do that today.
Can I ask one question? Are you, because I will say this, a lot of the fundraising I get from the Alumni Association is just a letter in the mail. Maybe some other folks have different experiences. Are you working with them any on some more of this digital effect of philanthropy or stirring up interest, not just for enrollment, but alumni interest?
Yeah, I think we're just beginning conversations with how do we bring, when we start looking at the publications that we're reviewing all of our publications at Mizzou and then trying to evaluate how they're going to hit the different audiences. We've already started talking with alumni about we want to make sure that we work together in coming up with that strategy because we want to make sure that all of it is aligned. And I do think that digital strategy will be a part of all the different, but we're working closely with not only alumni, but also Tom Hiles in terms of advancement.
One last question. So I'm on YouTube now. I was wondering what search terms can I use to find that video? I typed in Missouri, Mizzou, 160 over 90. I can't
About
find it.
Anthem? Can you try Mizzou Anthem? Mm-hmm.
I will send you all an email with all the links of where it lives. There's about 8 different places where we have it.
It's such a great video. It'd be wonderful if Mizzou faculty, staff, students actually put that in their signature because it's such an exciting video.
I'll send all the links to you, and then you can share it as often as you'd like.
And Cameron, I think we could use your help with some of the change management things we're building out. So it's so nice to see you.
She's doing a great job.
Great job.
Cameron, thank you. I think that's from my perspective, the kind of presentation that we as a board have been looking for. So very, very exciting. And you get to present again in a second, so great. Okay, so our third action item is the execution of our high-profile strategic fundraising opportunities and our philosophy on our advancement. So I'd like to invite President Choi to speak on that.
Thank you very much. Can I go to my presentation? While he's setting that up, there we go. Last Friday, we had an opportunity to discuss the high-priority strategic investments for the university, and it's tied in to strategic philanthropy. And the reason that that's very important is, as Chancellor Cartwright stated earlier, the strategy, the budget must follow the strategy. In the same way, our philanthropy also must follow the strategy and not the other way around. I'm reminded of a university where a donor was interested in hockey because the donor was a hockey fan and don't want to donate funds for a hockey rink. Well, they didn't need a hockey rink, but they built it. That didn't really align with the mission of the university. So we really need to make sure that the mission and vision are supported by philanthropy. The highest priorities for the university, we've been talking about this for the past year and a half. Student success and research and creative works. And the highest priority projects are going to be developed working with chancellors as it makes its way up from the universities, but also with input from the system so that we are all aligned of how to go about to achieve those goals as part of the strategic priorities. After seeing Mizzou's video, I was so inspired, I asked our team to say, can we have a video for the system as well that illustrates what makes us unique? And the team that's led by Kelly Weeman, Cameron Farwell, and also Susan Cameron developed this video. So if I can ask you to go to that video. It's a 60-second video that, well, here you go.
Here at the gateway to the west, take any city street, country road, or interstate. 1. Meet us at the intersection of avant-garde jazz and veterinary medicine, the crossroads of biological conservation and geological engineering. Together, 4 distinct universities share a set of core values, defining a commitment to serve their students, their communities, and the state of Missouri. We innovate and create. Charging toward excellence with integrity, we improve Missourians' lives while preparing leaders to impact the world. Crisscrossing the Show Me State, we collaborate and discover. We value respect and engage our students in dialogue that considers every perspective. We're at a turning point. Speeding forward, breaking barriers, and not checking the rearview mirror. We're the University of Missouri system.
So in terms of collaborating across the university, marketing material like this can also be developed with the team that's at Mizzou to share their expertise with the other campuses. So we are really ramping up that collaborative spirit that exists, and I'm really happy about that progress that we're making. In terms of the specific philanthropic opportunities, 2 of the most important ones are going to be in scholarship. One is based on the land grant scholarships that was launched by Mizzou last year to provide opportunities for Pell Grant students and also near Pell Grant students so that we can provide the fees and the tuition for that unmet component of their tuition and fees. The next opportunity is related to scholarships, but this is to ensure that we have the best and the brightest remain in the state of Missouri. Instead of being recruited by national merit scholarships to go to other universities like Oklahoma and Alabama. But for both of these projects, there was something that was mentioned earlier about incentives. These are incentives. And if the universities believe that this is the right area of investment for the university that leads to student success, they'll need to come up with $100 million in match. And if the $200 million from the system and universities is matched with $200 million from philanthropic support, over the next 5 years, we'll have $400 million. That'll make a dramatic impact in the success of our students. Our students who are Pell and near Pell will not have to work several jobs, will not have to make a choice between buying books or paying rent. And this will make a tremendous impact. And so we ask all of us who are in this room to say that this is a high priority, and we're going to align our philanthropy for that purpose. Now, in terms of the $100 million that's going to come from the universities at this moment do not have $100 sitting in the bank. It'll mean that they're going to have to reallocate, prioritize, and not do things that they have been doing so that they can make an investment that really makes a difference to students, especially students with the greatest needs.
Can I?
Sure.
I hate to interrupt you, but you said Pell and near Pell?
That's right.
What does near Pell mean?
There is actually a specific definition for near Pell, and I don't have that exact definition now, but there's a big drop-off between Pell students and non-Pell students in terms of what they receive from the federal government. Pell grants provide approximately $6,000 for the student if they meet the family income level, which I believe is around $55,000. But if you come from a family that makes $56,000, you don't qualify for that Pell grant. But they still have great needs, depending on their family's ability to pay. So we want to make sure that those students are also provided the opportunity to have more scholarships provided for them.
Good to know, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. The next 2 items are also related to research. As we stated for many, many months, TPMC is the highest priority. But this is not only the highest priority for Mizzou, but for all 4 universities, which means that we have to have meaningful collaboration, meaningful philanthropy. There may be some organizations in Kansas City and St. Louis who are interested in giving to programs that have tremendous research in the healthcare fields, but they may not want to make a donation, let's say, to universities that are outside of the system. Well, I believe that it's best for our universities like UMKC to partner with Mizzou to get partners, for example, like a Stowers or MRI Global, to support this type of activity, either through philanthropy or for joint research projects. And so we're asking all of the chancellors to take this very, very seriously in terms of creating that meaningful collaboration. When we have projects like this, many units within a university and the 4 universities will ask, what am I going to get out of it? What does my unit get out of it? What I'm going to say is that you're going to get more than what you put in. But if you come to the table with the plan that I'm going to make an investment because I see this as the highest priority, I guarantee you that we're going to make investments that will create a return on that investment for the universities. The next key area is in research that is beyond translational precision medicine. And there are many grand challenge problems that we can solve. For example, in cybersecurity, data sciences, precision medicine, obviously being one. But just yesterday, we had a research summit that brought together about 100 participants to talk about the role of the human in the digital age. We learned about how to use photo voice to be able to share information that cannot be shared through normal communication, and to understand how we can impact the livelihood of those who really believe in the role of the humanities in advancing science and vice versa. We have tremendous faculty members at our universities, so these projects that we're using as incentives will catalyze the research growth. But as with all investments, especially during periods of diminishing resources, we're going to be asking, what is the return on that investment? By spending $100 million over the next 5 years just from the system on investment, we need to see dramatic increases in extramural research grants, expenditures, as well as journal articles and citations and other measures that define a powerful research university. And so every month we have a dashboard that will be measuring proposals, awards, expenditures, as well as new dashboards that look at faculty research productivity in areas like journals and citations as well. The last major area of investment is to attract the best and the brightest to our universities. The National Academy of Science, Medicine, as well as Engineering are the 3 most important national academies that exist. And they really define world-class researchers, world-class faculty members who can transform an institution. Well, currently at our university system, we have 10 National Academy members. And they are world-class faculty, and they have created the type of breakthroughs in plant sciences and other fields that make us very proud because of the increase in the stature. So through this program, we want to attract 10 additional National Academy members. The universities will have to come up with the salary and the balance of the startup funds. And startup for these National Academy members are going to be quite high. But in addition to our investments, if we can leverage that by having philanthropic contributions to support the grand challenge areas that we have for our universities, this can make a major impact to our growth as not only an AAU institution, but as public research universities. So with that, I'd like to ask if there are any questions or suggestions in terms of the high priority projects that we have.
Did I miss online distance?
It is there, but the online distance we don't believe is is going to lead to a lot of philanthropic, but there may be opportunities for partnerships with the state. Thank you.
Thank you, President Choi. Anybody else have any questions before we move on to our fourth informational item? Okay.
All very exciting.
Okay, Cameron, I'd like to invite you back up. As the board knows, from the onset of this committee, we have talked about putting together dashboards that are meant to serve as scorecards to track several metrics across the 4 universities where we can benchmark their performance against one another, and then also deep dive into each one of the universities so we can continually track their improvement, both along marketing and communications and advancement. So this is a first stab, and I want to thank Cameron and Tom. I believe they worked very hard with their counterparts at all the universities to come up with some initial metrics that we can start gauging. And this is the first report, so we can't see quarter over quarter or year over year improvement or decreases. But I hope you all like this beginning of this process, and it's a way for us to look at how we're doing in marketing and advancement across the universities. Thank you.
So really, I just wanted to tell you what you're looking at, and I think you're receiving hard copies of this now. I won't go through any of this data. I just wanted to explain sort of our philosophy as we put this together. This represents a lot of work from all the different communications teams at all of our universities, and I really want to thank all of them for working hard on this. The hard part is cornering how you measure communications and marketing. Some of it you pay for, some of it you don't. And Curator Farmer really wanted us to look at return on investment. And so that's what we were trying to corner. So on the first page of the dashboard, it gives you a system-wide view. And we chose data that we could all come up with apples and apples data for. And then the last page of the dashboard explains to you how we came about those numbers. Now, that seems like an easy thing, but we had to make sure we were measuring in the same way. There's lots of different ways to look at your numbers in terms of social media or other things. And the front page also gives you a sense of what kind of investment we're putting in terms of marketing spend and staffing levels. So that will give you a view on investment. But we found that in order to give, we had to make compromises in precision of data so that we could create apples and apples. And so what we did is we created individual pages for each university so that you could get a better look at how they measured their own success. And at the top of each page for the universities, if we can click over to one of them, it's important to note that each university has different goals. At Mizzou, enrollment is very important to us, so a lot of our strategy is focused on that. But at some of the universities, they aren't needing to add more students. They're focused on other goals. And so what each university put at the top was, what are our top 3 communication goals? And this is how we measure our success. So I wanted to explain to you a little bit the format of what you're looking at, and then you can take a closer look at this at your leisure. The other thing to note about this is that this is really a draft document. I think it's, as Curator Farmer said, it's our first stab. So if this document could be changed or improved, we'd be interested in that feedback. And the other thing to note is that we wanted to create a document with real data for you for the purposes of this meeting. And some of the measurements are looking at quarterly results. And so we didn't have a full quarter before this meeting met. So we created this based on a sample quarter. So the next report that you see will be the real first fiscal quarter, which would include all of this month. So really this is a picture, it's a draft of what we attempted to do. And we're pretty excited about it in terms of measuring what we're doing. And I think ultimately I would say that this document There are limitations in some of the data. I wouldn't say it's a good document for drawing conclusions, but it's a really good document for asking good questions. And we're hoping that this does bring about good questions about how we can improve.
Thank you. Is Tom speaking to the advancement?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. Let's switch to the advancement side.
Which is the smaller of the two.
And where's Tom?
Do you want to come up, Tom, just in case?
Yeah, we put together sort of a phone call, talked to our colleagues, and I talked to Jamie last week, and these are the items that we came up with. If you were in a campaign, total productivity refers to cash and pledges, which can be confusing at some times, but if you want to think about a $5 million gift that's paid over 5 years, we count the $5 million in the pledge amount on the year that it's made, but then we count the cash as it comes in. So that's the differential there. So we included total productivity, $1 million gifts, and then just donor visits that just talk about some of the general activity. We talked to Jamie a little bit as well, potentially to add proposal submissions as part of this, so that's something we'll look at perhaps going forward. But I'll be glad to answer any questions if there are any.
I do think, we had our phone conversation before Moon's report and his excellence through innovation. So what I do think would be helpful to add is to look at the 4 initiatives of scholarship dollars and philanthropy targeted towards TPMC and our other strategic initiatives. And if there's any way we can think about how either our marketing communications are targeted towards that or our advancement communications and efforts are targeted towards supporting those initiatives, I think that would be very helpful on here.
Yes.
Said another way, are you suggesting we don't just look at gross dollars, but that we look at whether it's aligned with our strategic goals?
Yes.
If I could say, and obviously Kelly and Tom and Cameron, you all put a lot of work into this, but every once in a while we have to thank a curator for the work they've done. Curator Farmer, this is really outstanding. This is going to, I think, make a difference in how the university moves forward. Thank you for your efforts.
Well, I thank Cameron. It was just me sort of being noisy and squeaky, and they actually did all of the work. So
Squeaky modest. Curators are the best.
She's modest. She created the first version of it herself, so she's good with spreadsheets.
No, I'm serious, Curator Farmer. This is some great work.
I'm on a lot of flights. I've got Excel to do.
Okay, we are not we're done in the public session. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Well,
trying to keep it moving.
Those are my 4 informational items for the, what do we call our committee here? It's a long committee. The excellence, hold on, sorry. The External Affairs, Marketing, and Advancement Committee. So I'd like all of those in favor of adjourning to say aye. Is that my order of events
Well,
here?
you kind of need to have someone make a motion.
Oh, I have to make a motion. Sorry, guys. I lost my page.
Your specialty is
I'll make a motion, we
spreadsheets.
adjourn.
Yeah.
Jeff seconded, so we're good now, all in favor.
All votes, all in favor say aye.
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 Those say no. Okay, Mr. Chairman, that concludes the business of the External Affairs and Marketing.
Thank you very much. We have, we're going right into executive session with HR. Then we have another important executive session. I know everybody wants to take a quick break, but may I gently suggest we're running behind schedule.
We're done here?
Yeah, headed to executive session.
All right.